Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined episode commentary podcast, normally about Doctor Who, but for now we're looking at the Quatermass Experiment. I'm going to watch the episodes that exist and drop in facts and observations and try and guess what my special guest's favourite thing about the instalment might be.
Hello, Toby. And first of all, many congratulations on the publication of the Quatermass Experiment. I know how hard you've worked on it, and I know how long you've worked on it, and it's wonderful to see it come to fruition, and try not to think about the other 4 volumes that you're going to have to write after this. Just revel in the moment. As I record this at 8:30 on Sunday evening, that's the 11th of May, you've just had your Manchester-based launch. I hope that went really well, and I look forward to seeing you on the 19th for the second launch in London at the BFI. Hello to everybody else. My name's Jon Dear. I'm a writer on TV and film. I write quite a lot about Nigel Kneale and archive television. I'm writing my first book on the ghost stories for Christmas, which hopefully should be finished this year, when I can revel in that as you are reveling in your achievements right now. And I do various other things, many of which Toby has helped with. I arranged the Nigel Kneale centenary events in 2022, which Toby hosted both of those, and appeared in dramatisations we made of You Must Listen and The Chopper. We did the 2023 70th anniversary Quatermass Experiment live, which Toby played James Fuller-Love. I narrated and produced, and thanks to Toby and Simon and other people, we got us on Newsnight, which was amazing. And I've also done the afterword, haven't I, for your Quatermass Experiment book. To say thank you. You've always been incredibly supportive on projects that I've worked on, and it's very much appreciated. I also do a couple of podcasts, one on Jallo and one on Nigel Kneale, BERGCast, the very first episode of which you were on, talking about the Quatermass Experiment. So with wonderful synchronicity, I'm on yours talking about the Quatermass Experiment. In this case, only one particular episode. This is the 3rd time I have been privileged to appear on Happy Times and Places, but I have still not had the first ever recording I did for you done yet. That particular avenue of pleasure has yet to be transversed. I think that was during lockdown, when the universe was less than half its present size. But we can consign that to a persons reported missing, which by a wonderful coincidence is the title of the second and final surviving episode of the Quatermass Experiment. So I will choose 5 things to make it as easy and as fair as possible. Those things will be things that are specific to this episode. So I won't just choose Reg Tate. I may choose Reg Tate doing something or saying something, but I won't choose an actor generally. I'll do things that are that pertain directly to persons reported missing. I won't do anything in bad faith, so I won't choose The Fly as much as I'd like to. No doubt you'll talk about that. So I look forward to watching this again. I'm sure you can, to quote Bill Hicks, plaster on a fake smile and plough through this shit one more time. And I'll see you on the other side to see how close you get, or indeed if how simpatico we are with your 5 favourite things and my 5 favourite things. 5 favourite things. It's too late. Sorry. Anyway, see you on the other side.
Amazing. Jon Dear, with whom I will always associate lots of lovely Quatermass things. He mentioned them there, was kind enough to get me involved in all of them, and I have to say, being in the live reading of the Quatermass Experiment as James Fuller-Love was, a highlight for me, and probably the thing of all the things I've done in my life that if I told my younger self I would be doing them, I think would just go, well, life is amazing. Whereas, of course, real life real life crashes in and says, even if amazing things happen, life is still quite tricky at times. But we plough on, and that's why we must never underestimate the lovely things we have opportunities to do, and the people who are important to us and that we encounter on the way. And Jon is one of those, and he's been, as I probably text and WhatsApp Jon pretty much every day. Jon, Andy Murray, and I are in a sort of brains trust. We've got a WhatsApp that is the combined knowledge and intelligence of three men, all wrapped up into one thing. And so anyway, let's hope we won't be manifesting at Westminster Abbey any time soon. And if we can, the pictures will be lost and you'll never see it. However, yes, so Jon has received his copies of my book this morning as I record this, and as I record this, it's pretty much going to go out to patrons live. I'm planning on releasing that as soon as I've put it together, because we're in the throes of the book launch, which comes to London on Monday as I record this. The Friday before, I've already done one book launch in Manchester Sunday just gone, and so Jon had a chance to hear episode 1 and my reaction to Andy Murray, who appropriately was at the book launch on Sunday just gone, and also has his copy of the book. So how exciting is all of that? But it's worth mentioning, actually, something that Jon's clearly not going to mention. He's not going to mention an actor. What the hell am I supposed to do? That's all I know about. But Jon has told me what he's not doing the fly, although he did say in the WhatsApp that was as a joke, obviously, when I muted it, that he's going to pick the fly. So and if you don't know what the fly is, I will talk about the fly. The fly has a lot to answer for, possibly. We don't know for sure, but I missed something hugely obvious during the recording of the first episode of this, so it's worth going to the patrons as I do now with these happy times and places on the Doctor Who's. I get patron feedback, and it's very interesting because most of the people that hang around my Patreon are there for Doctor Who content, and I've had a little resistance to Quatermass content, but I can surely make no apology when I've written a book about it as putting some stuff out there, and I'm just sharing in my love for it, and I hope that it becomes infectious and turns you into a blobby mass of Quatermass appreciation. So the feedback that we have is the fantastic Sabrina Tirabassi, who's over in Italy, says, I did see the episode because I have every episode available of the 3 Quatermass serials on a 2005 DVD box set. Italy does have a good connection with Quatermass on the printed page. That's all in the book, because the scripts were published in Italy as part of a compendium, and then as the individual books, like the ones that we have over here, but translated. And I thought I should just see if they make any changes, and they do. And so I've had to painstakingly list all of those whilst translating the Italian text into English. Ah, dear. But anyway, that was quite a challenge, but I got there, and it's in the book. Robbie Carnegie says, this is the reason principal reason that reminded me to go to these, because Robbie Carnegie points out quite correctly, I would single out the names as one of the most important things about this production. When I was a boy, my parents would talk about Quatermass. I didn't know what a Quatermass was, but somehow the very name was imbued with terror. It wasn't until I watched the John Mills Quatermass that I realised it was a man. But as well as the title character, Victor Caroon is also a name that hints at creeping horror. I mean, I think why I didn't choose the name Quatermass, which is, I think, possibly the best thing about Quatermass, and it's just a name, because it's so well chosen. And, of course, because then what Nigel Kneale wrote, and Rudolph Cartier produced, it is now inextricably linked with foreboding, terror and scares and mystery. But it wouldn't be had it been Charlton, which is the name that Nigel Kneale originally put as a placeholder name. So, yeah, Quatermass. Why didn't I choose the name Quatermass? That would have been an obvious one. But Jon is obviously... it would be too late to choose it now, I think, anyway, for episode 2. It'd be like sort of choosing halfway through, I don't know, the Armageddon Factor and going, I love the fact the show's called Doctor Who, or I'm going to choose the TARDIS. It is worth pointing out that the name is amazing. And Carroon, Victor Carroon is a Manx name. And Kneale quite often uses a Manx names in a lot of stuff. I mean, even in his episode of Sharp, years later, there's a Private Skillicorn who is not in the Bernard Cromwell original book of Sharp's Gold, but Kneale has added. Trevor Smith is waiting for his copy to arrive. Oh, and then he says he's had an email and his is on the way. Yes, the sort of book release has been staggered just for practical reasons in terms of them being sent out and got to people. So I hope nobody's had to wait too long. But I applaud Stuart for all the effort he's put in this week. Stuart, publisher at 10 Acre Films, which is where you can still get copies of the Quatermass Experiment book by me. Stephen says, very much looking forward to reading your book. This episode... He's talking about episode 1, that's what these comments are a response to, is a lovely reminder of Quatermass. When I was a boy, I had to go... Oh, this episode of Happy Times and Places he was talking about. When I was a boy, I had to go to Great Ormond Street Hospital, and there was a Dr. Quatermass there, much to my mum's amusement. How marvellous, Dr. Quatermass! I love that. Adam Parkins says, I'm saying this to listen on the train on Sunday. Oh, well, and I met Adam at the book launch on Sunday, so that was nice. The amount of patrons at the book launch on Sunday was fabulous. I was so heartening. I felt so much love in that room, and I was really humbled by it and the effort that people had made to come and just be really supportive of this funny little project of mine. It was so lovely to meet so many of the patrons, and we did get David suggested that we got a photo with all the patrons, and we did, so I'm pleased about that. A different David Gillespie Pratt, who was also there, said, we watched both episodes last night, and I think what Kneale did well was the scene setting in his first episodes. Careful, gradual world building ending with an otherworldly twist. These 2 episodes belong to another world, not just in TV terms, but culturally too, more so than the later 2 serials. What I did find fascinating this time was the almost automatic hero worship of the crew of BR7. This week I've been reading about Captain Scott and his doomed expedition and how he's portrayed for years, often as a national hero. Explorers, even ones doomed to turn into hideous space creatures, are still to be venerated. Though you do get the sense in episode 2 of Kneale that Kneale is needling this attitude a little. I hope that made sense, and if not, you can sub it to make it sound right. Ha ha! That's a reference to Roger Delgado's in Quatermass 2. Great stuff, and I can't wait to hear episode 2. Yes, well, I mean, I think that's important, and I wonder now if I went into this in the book enough. I think I did, because Kneale in his planning highlights very much that Carroon is a new Elizabethan hero. And I actually don't miss that world where we venerate people who do things. Now, of course, yes, I know Captain Scott is looked at in a certain way for being sort of rather foolhardy. But I think there is something about endeavour that of its nature is admirable, and possibly the people that engage in it need to be slightly flawed. You know, you need to be slightly crazy to pull off a miraculous thing. But I'm not sure the flaws matter in that sense. Yeah, the flaws matter if you live with a person or you're in a shop with a person, but what somebody represents who's achieved a great thing. I think because nowadays, of course, if somebody went into space and was brilliant and came back and discovered life on Mars or something, somebody would soon dig out an old tweet of theirs, or somebody who went, oh, I was at university with them and they're a bit of a wanker, you know, and suddenly we boil everybody down to, you know, all the weaknesses that flesh is heir to. And I think actually as a species to have lost something to venerate, to humble ourselves, and I sort of argue with the loss of religion as well, and I'm not a religious man, and used to be very cynical about religion, but actually to have something that we humble ourselves towards, that shows us that we're not amazing, or that we're not the most important thing, or the universe doesn't center around us, and there is something external to us that is important and unreachable, it keeps us striving and it keeps us humble. And I don't think either of those things are too bad. It's so easy now to be neither of those things from the comfort of our own home, dismissing anything and in order to make ourselves feel better and secure. And I understand where that comes from, that people need something to feel positive about. But actually, I think sometimes something that reminds you that you're not all that can sometimes bring out the best in you. So I do like the fact that there's this sort of unquestioning approval or even worship of these three men, just for the sheer fact that they've gone into space and done this amazing thing that nobody's ever done. And of course, all that celebration is then brought into sharp focus by the fact that the truth of what has happened. Paul Murphy says, I'm listening to this on holiday, a warm spring morning in a room in Sorrento overlooking the Bay of Naples. It's all Italy today here at Happy Times and Places. When Italy is, whenever I've been there, a very happy time and place to be. With a cuppa on the go, says Paul Murphy. A perfect, delightful hour and a half or so. Thanks, Toby. Thanks, Paul. Chris Williams, thanks Toby, looking forward to episode 2 and also the Experiment box set with the insane amount of extras, and my book is on its way. Woohoo! I know Chris has got his book now, I think. Yes, the Quatermass Experiment box set has been announced from Hammer. That's Experiment with a big X. I'm all over that like a rash as well. Paul Dunn, I loved this, and I'm sure none of us would mind if you did a Happy Times and Places on all the Quatermass serials. There's a couple of people who might disagree with you there, Paul, if my feedback is anything to go by. But I probably will get to them eventually because, well, I'm going to do a book on all of them, and also it's why not? Jim Mooney says, unfortunately, the cost of shipping to Australia exceeds the cost of the book. I'm sorry, Jim. Is it possible to be made available through any other online retailers or as an ebook? Outside of my pay grade, Jim, but I'm going to be speaking to Stuart about various things like that. Yeah. Hold that thought. Sorry, Jim. It's it is a small outfit, and obviously not a book that's going to be mass produced, so our margins are not what they might be for other books, and shipping is of course crazy. And Joe Llewellyn says, on Saturday, waiting for it to cool off so I could work on my roof, I finally watched both episodes without distractions. Reginald Tate was very good as Quatermass, very suspenseful. I cannot wait for my copy to take the 5,000-mile journey to my mailbox, because yes, Joe is not in Australia like Jim, but he is in the United States, so it's wending its way around. I hope it doesn't get lost for 57 hours or more. So those are the comments, and I have to say the appreciation, again, from a lot of people for whom Quatermass is not a big thing. Most people have come to my Patreon for Doctor Who, and Quatermass has been slightly imposed upon them, but I hope that my enthusiasm for it and the fact that it is related to Doctor Who and has plenty of crossover means that you will get something for your indulgence. I'm grateful to you for being there, for listening. So I'm going to go in to the second and final existing part of the Quatermass Experiment, which has many magnificent things in it, and I've got to choose 5 of them. John has listened to the first episode, so he's kindly not going to repeat anything I chose for episode 1. So let's see what's on offer for episode 2, Persons Reported Missing, of the thriller in 6 parts by Nigel Kneale, transmitted live in July 1953, where did that come from? Known as the Quatermass Experiment. So, episode 2 comes in with Mars from the Planets playing, but it is finally playing at the correct speed. So this is the version of Mars better known to, well, anybody that knows Mars. Whether it was played at the wrong speed by mistake for episode 1 is anybody's guess, but they've clearly corrected it. Now, here, so here is John Glenn, who plays Dr. Briscoe. It's a blank screen for quite a long time, isn't there? And we have our first previously on, and this is hugely theatrical. It is basically a pan along the characters, with John Glenn giving a bit of what has previously happened on the Quatermass Experiment, and as each of the characters gets name checked, they sort of look towards the rocket, and that is I rather like it. I think it's sort of rather quaint and lovely, and it's artfully done by Rudolph Cartier, but not naturalistic at all. And the fact that they take a bow in episode 6 of the Quatermass Experiment, this serial that's renowned for being wholly televisual and showing what was possible to do with television, still got one foot in the theatre. But that previously on means a lot of people have speculated that, unlike the later Quatermass serials where it's film sequences edited together, and that's a film sequence from episode 1 that's been cut short. It's much longer in the previous episode. They're gone. But that because Rudolph Cartier had permission, initially refused because of equity agreements and various things. The head honchos at the BBC suspected he wouldn't be allowed to use clips of the actors from last week's episode in this week's episode to show what had happened up to this point. Anyway, they do sort that out. I'm 100% convinced. A lot of people have reached the conclusion that it didn't happen with this, and that episode 2 is proof that it didn't happen with this. But I'm certain that in the later episodes it is film edited together, taken during rehearsals, they'd planned which scenes to film bits of in order to cut them together, so that John Glenn, who did it for the later episodes and indeed for episode 1, would do the narration, saying what had happened in the previous episodes. So that film could exist somewhere. I mean, it's hugely unlikely, but it did exist. So there was footage from episodes 3, 4, and 5, and indeed from this episode, which will have been taken at rehearsals, not from this tele-recording, to do the previously on later episodes. Now, these two ambulance men are not credited, but one of them is Sheldon Allen, who gets electrocuted and burnt to a crisp in Quatermass and the Pit. He's not in Quatermass 2, though. Otherwise, he would have been in all 3. He plays a couple of non-speaking parts in Quatermass and the Pit. And Charles Hammond, the other ambulance man, is in the film of the Quatermass Experiment. So those two non-speaking ambulance men are both worth just hovering over for a moment, just to give them their nods to they both make a contribution. Fuller Love gets a swear word in the book. He gets various additions in the script book, which is not an exact replica of the camera script. And he gets to say, "Poor bastard," to go through all that, and only to know that you're cold. I remember thinking, gosh, yes, even in the 50s, it's very grown up to have swear words. But they are not. They are not in the camera script or in the broadcast version. But yes, here we are. I mean, that set looks magnificent behind, doesn't it? Still the sort of smashed up house. Eugene Lear here, Irish. And there's Neil Wilson. Sam Seeley from Spearhead from Space. But he was famous for being a policeman, Tub Barrel, in Dixon of Dock Green. So, I mean, I wonder if he even had the same uniform. But something I discovered that's not even on his IMDb or anything, that he was also a writer. He wrote as Neil Kingsley, but I found that in a piece of documentation somewhere. But that's I don't think that's online anywhere at the moment. So yeah, he was a member of the Writers Guild. Did I talk about him having a hard time on a later job? And I was told he was rather bullied by a director, which kind of knocked the wind out of him. Poor old Neil Wilson, which is a terrible, terrible shame. So, and yes, here we have everyone in the spaceship set, which of course was only represented by film last week because it was only in the one scene. How long is it? This is Eugene Leahy, who is mentioned in Sybil Thorndike's autobiography because he was a long-standing member of her company in St. Joan, and he played the Bishop of Beauvais. I like the way that Hugh Kelly, when the police inspector says, how do you do or something, he just sort of deadpans pleasure. That's not in the script. It's Hugh Kelly, who I think is so good as Patterson. And I love his grubby coat that shows that he's been hard at work checking. But Patterson is completely honest with the police inspector here now, much to Quatermass's annoyance. He's trying to sort it out himself first. But Eugene Lear, his delivery is slightly sort of he's very sort of, I'm about 100 years old, but he is. Did I mention this last time? I did. I think I might have mentioned this in episode 1, but he's 70, which is too old to be a police inspector. Now, there were some professions after the war where people stayed on to work beyond retirement age because of a shortage of the correct age of men, because so many had been killed in World War II. But I still think 70 is slightly pushing it. And the character's comes across quite well on paper, and he's slightly sort of muffled here. And I had to do a lot of research because IMDb has Lear then appearing in non-speaking parts in episodes of Maigret later, and you always have to worry about that because it just takes a name to be slightly mistyped in a script, or IMDb to be doing a bit of wishful thinking. So I didn't want to just put down that he was a non-speaking actor in his last TV credits, because that could have been wrong, and that's a bit of an ignominious ending to impose upon somebody when it's incorrect. But I scrolled through the 4 episodes of Maigret that he is alleged to have been in, and he's there with very thick glasses, looking very, very old. So maybe he was just rather keep his hand in than not. But so he's reduced to non-speaking background artist work by the end of his hugely illustrious career. I mean, he played Cauchon in St. Joan for a good 20 years, and that's a hard part and a big part. I love this scene between Fuller Love and the news editor. I love the fact that his journalistic instinct means that he sniffs out that Quatermass is lying, but he has sympathy for him, and it also has the word fibs in it. That doesn't make him tell fibs. You've got to carry that off then and now. I think requires a certain ability with language when you're delivering it as an actor. But I think Paul Whitson-Jones does it absolutely well, and I love the way he sells it to his editor, and I love this speech he has about space. It's not space the final frontier, but it's a new wilderness, pitch dark both day and night, empty and cold. It's beautiful. I love the fact that Fuller Love is here to give us, because Quatermass can't be too fancy. He's the man of science, and actually it's his job and everybody else's job, so they can't be too. It would seem slightly indulgent for them to suddenly get sort of wistful about the job that they're doing, and it would dilute the urgency of the problem that they have. But the fact that you can cut over to Fuller Love and have that, I think gives a slightly different character to the piece, and I love it. So I suspect that scene between Fuller Love and his editor will be that speech of Fuller Love's, which I really love. And I mean, I used to read that script book over and over. I remember taking it on a plane to go on holiday to visit my dad in Germany and reading it over and over and over. And I used to say those lines in my head, and I was privileged enough to say them out loud in Alexandra Palace. Stella Richman here. She's married to Alec Clunes, who later becomes connected with the role of Quatermass. I think slightly incorrectly in the way that history has written it up, but that will be in book 3. But yes, Stella Richman, who went on to be a head of LWT or head of drama at LWT. She had an amazing career, but here, as an actress, she is basically stroppy nurse. And I think one of her few lines is, "I shall have to report this." We had the fireman in episode 1 going, "I'm going to make a report about this." There's a character in Quatermass at the Pit whose final words are, "I must make a report." Nigel Kneale had disdain for people who wanted to make reports. I love this actor, Ian Collin, playing Detective Inspector Lomax. I don't think I put it in the book, but I spoke to Ian Collins' son, Peter Wetherell, who is a Mayfair estate agent, rather fancy, high-end, but he gave me some time on the phone. And he said that his dad had been sounded out about taking over from William Hartnell, who was a mate of his in Doctor Who, and that Ian Collin would have made Doctor Who even darker. But he's got a great connection with another famous monster, because Ian Collin is the man who took the photograph known as the surgeon's photograph of the Loch Ness Monster, because his father, Marmaduke Wetherell, Ian Collin was really called Ian Collin Wetherell, was a famous hoaxer and quite a character, and Ian was his son. But the reason that it's called the surgeon's photograph is because one of their party was a surgeon, and they reckoned they should give him the credit for it, because a surgeon would be more likely to be believed than if you called it the actor's photograph, because actors are known to be absolute charlatans and liars. So he has a wonderful connection with another monster, Ian Collin, and I think he's lovely. I think he has a beautiful dusky voice, and unlike Jack Warner, who's great in the film, who's a sort of dogged, sort of funny, sort of policeman. Policeman's lot is not a happy one. He's there's something much more elegant about Ian Collin, which I know was much more to Nigel Kneale's taste, and I love the character of Lomax. And in fact, that's who John and Andy Murray thought I should play in the live version, and I wasn't sure, but no, I went for Full of Love in the end, and it meant we get Kevin McNally as Lomax, which is no bad thing. I remember watching this. He's got a line, hasn't he, where she starts crying and he says, "Don't stop," i.e. let it all out. But my mum, watching this, because I'd put it on and expect people to watch it, laughed because she thought he said, "Don't sob." No, he didn't say "Don't sob," Mum. He said "Don't stop," which is very sort of, proper British thing, saying you let it out. You don't have to be stoical all the time. I think Isabel Dean's stunningly beautiful and wonderful delivery that she has. But she does have to do a lot of this sort of staring far away acting. But she became a major TV star, and you can sort of see why. But I think female parts date much more than male roles in these sorts of programs. But I don't know, Kneale wasn't wild about. Here we have the revelation that Karun has come back and he's a shadow of his former self, and obviously he's stricken. And Judith has to confess to Quatermass that she's having an affair, and it's with Gordon Briscoe, who we've not met yet, but who is going to be another important member of the team. And I know Kneale, when they were doing the remake, suggested that subplot maybe be cut. But I think it, just as the guilt is piled onto Quatermass because it was his invention, and it's more than just somebody he's employed. It's a friend and colleague who's gone up. They're all friends and colleagues who've gone up. To have it as Judith's husband adds pressure on her, of course, because that really helps those opening scenes in episode 1, that she's not just waiting for a colleague to come back, she's waiting for her husband. But then in episode 2, when we're given the revelation, but she'd been kind of cheating on him, that means she has a different kind of guilt, but she doesn't escape the guilt that casts a shadow over Quatermass's furrowed countenance. And I think that's very Kneale, and I think that's very gloomy, because she was trying to, her and Gordon are both nice people, and we like them, and they're heroes for whom we root, but they aren't let off the hook in terms of feeling guilty. And Sergeant Best has taken the fingerprints, which is nice because it leads us out of the previous scene, gives us a bit of a sense of urgency, and gives Quatermass an excuse to take Karun under his wing. Suddenly he's not safe in the hospital, and the fact that Karun, even when he's back, is not safe. There are various people that are interested in him. One, it gives us the impetus to take Karun under Quatermass's care, which means we can have various scenes later on that are essential for the plot development. But it also propels Maurice Durant, interesting actor who's got one line, so you'll have to read about him in the book. But so Quatermass comes in, and his first proper encounter with Lomax and his doughty sidekick, Detective Sergeant Best, Frank Hawkins, who later had a regular role in early Z-Cars, played a lot of policemen, Frank Hawkins. But so Quatermass comes in very angry with Lomax because they've taken the fingerprints and they're treating Victor as a criminal, which they're not, but they're going through all of the protocol that's necessary. I suppose it seems a little quaint now that we've got these two Scotland Yard men investigating this, when you'd really have a specialist team these days. But in those days, dealing with the unknown, that's all you had. So you'd go to Scotland Yard and they would have to learn as we do, which is again useful for the storytelling, but also it means we have a counterpoint with the otherworldly and the people of science who might be talking in language that we don't understand. We need sort of a pair of ordinary coppers, even though one of them is very elegant, but we need this pair of ordinary coppers to be a sort of prosaic counterpoint to all the strangeness that's going on, but also a kind of down to earth and pragmatic sort of headbutter with Quatermass, and the fact that I think in the script and in the development, that Lomax is quite terse and testy and at loggerheads with Quatermass. I think the fact that Ian Collin is so reasonable and the character has softened slightly in the development means that, again, Quatermass can't be too angry in a way because they're not doing anything unreasonable. And we have this wonderful revelation that that's some stock footage of the comet, which I've narrowed it down to when that might have been taken with the help of Charles Norton. It's one of the few film sequences here. But that idea that the spacesuits, you have the inner linked section and then the outer section that goes on, and the fact that the link sections are still linked inside, that's a beautiful mystery. What's happened to these astronauts? The first thing we think, that they've been sucked out, is obviously not the case because they're still in their spacesuits. But then they couldn't even have got out of their spacesuits, so why aren't they in them? It's layering on the mystery. And it's brilliant, and it makes this more than man turns into monster. And here we have a reference to, these two journalists played by Patrick Westwood and Dominic Lafoe are this sort of funny chorus. But Lafoe's character, wasn't it, I think, says, be a time to pick murder, be like pushing somebody off Mount Everest. Mount Everest was only conquered 6 weeks prior to this, so the reference to Mount Everest is a topical reference. I'm very sorry, sir, says Paddy Hayes as the airport security guy, who had no lines in the original, so he gets no credit here. He was a non-speaking artist who gets a line late in the day, but too late to get a credit. But I'm sure he'll have been happy to ring his mum and say, "But I'm going to say something." He was an actor and a stunt man. The people leaving the plane are the same people who watched the crash site 10 minutes earlier. The same extras go round and around and around. And I think Paddy Russell is amongst their number 2. So here we have Enid Lindsay, who's later in the Douglas Wilmer Sherlock Holmes, Mrs. Hudson, no less, as Louisa Green, wife of Charles Green, the character played by Peter Pathurst, who's the head of the mission, and John Glenn, whose voice we've heard as Dr. Gordon Briscoe. I love that exchange between Fulanov and Quatermass, because Quatermass has sort of said, I'm not going to help you, and he rather amusingly says, "Oh, I'm just here to watch the aeroplanes." I got a big laugh for that at Ali Pali, by the way. I was so pleased. And then, of course, at the end, and I love that pat he gives to the to his fellow reporter because he got the story. But then when Quatermass and he lock eyes, he reassures the professor. He says, I'm just here to watch the aeroplanes, i.e. I'm not going to be an awful journalist and repeat that woman's distress just to sell a few papers. It's a great moment between Quatermass and Full of Love, and it's a great piece of writing from Kneale. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that a fly has landed on the monitor. He's slightly out of, I think he's in a darker space now, but he will pop up. He will keep popping up, the bastard. But I love this scene. This is a great piece of detective work from our sort of, supporting factotum policeman, Detective Sergeant Best. He's there really just to sort of ask questions and do bits. But he gets his moment here where he spots, we've established that he's an excellent fingerprint taker, and he spots that there's a characteristic of the fingerprints that he's taken that is not Karoon's, doesn't match the folder with Karoon's vital statistics in, but it does match a distinctive central pocket loop in the file of one of the other men. He's got one of the other men's fingerprints. How on earth has that happened? Again, this is more than man into monster. This is something different. This is Kneale's take on it, which is much more fascinating and philosophical and mysterious. I can see the fly now at the bottom of the screen, and here we have Karoon now taken to the British rocket group, and the beautifully voiced Dr. Briscoe, played by John Glenn, who had a history with Isabel Dean. They'd known each other beforehand, and she told me that she'd rather fallen in love with him. But he was, how that would have worked out is anybody's guess, because he was gay, but it's not unusual for marriages of those kind to have taken place. But anyway, by this time she had married the playwright Bill Fairchild, so it was moot. But she told me that prior to that she had been rather in love with John Glenn, so any connection they might have probably didn't require too much acting. Glenn was ultimately, he partnered with another actor called David Enders, and they opened a restaurant together and became the chief hospitality wallers at the Chichester Festival Theatre. And he became rather celebrated as a restaurateur with his he and David's restaurant called L'Aiglon, which L'Aiglon is it's a baby bird, isn't it? Duncan Lamont does such a great job of doing this stricken acting, and I love this mysterious stock music that comes in. I've listed all of the music that features that they've hoiked from the BBC Graham's library. Now, this speech is interesting that Quatermass has here, which he delivers to camera whilst the fly is on the right of screen distracting us. But this speech is chopped out of the script book. It's a helpful speech for us to feel some sympathy to Quatermass. He is a man who has the scars of regret all over him, and we learn later in Quatermass 2 that his wife has probably died, but he has a daughter in Quatermass 2, but then in the Euston Quatermass we learn that she's died as well. But there he has that speech about 10 years ago I committed myself to land surveying in the tropics. At least then I would only have harmed myself. I think, in the film, anyone used to the Quatermass movies where Brian Donlevy says, "There's no room for human feelings in science, Judith," could see that obviously a guilt-ridden Quatermass is much more has much more a dramatic appeal for Kneale, who I think enjoys us having a bit of sympathy and likes a sort of melancholy about his hero, who is fully aware that his striving for frontier breaking, his pioneering spirit, will always carry with it a great cost, even if not to himself. She says to Gordon, "I'm staying, but presumably, spoilers, but Victor does not make it alive to the end of the serial. Presumably, her and Gordon can get it back together. So at least there's some happy ending to the ultimate demise of poor old Victor Karoon. So here we have, yes, the wife of the wife of Charles Green, Louisa, but we are told that Louisa and Charles have, well, she calls him Charlie and he calls her Lou. And so here Victor is saying, I'm cold, Lou, I'm cold. Which is, again, another hint that things are not all they seem with Victor Carroon. Well, we know they're not all they seem, but Duncan Lamont does such a good job. I think his performance is key to the success of this, and James Swanton indeed was brilliant in our live version. But this is so sad. They have a kind of connection because there's a vestige of Charles Green there lurking within the avatar that looks like Victor Carroon, but is in fact the combined knowledge of all three, and that's a fantastic, fertile idea. Camera's not quite sure where to look there, is it? There's a few shots that are slightly out of focus. It's hard when you've got a 4-shot. But yeah, it's a compelling idea. Yeah, I think they do struggle with the blocking sometimes, and that's partially because the sets, I mean, sometimes they're not even 3-walled, are they? I mean, I think the set in Lomax's office is basically a back window. There's the door as well, but we have to be quite flat on a lot of these interior sets, although at least there's a sense of size about this one, but that's why I think the camera sometimes struggles with who to alight on, and that 3-shot, it had sort of 2 people on the edge and then someone in the foreground out of focus and somebody in the background out of focus, which is a struggle. Bernard, you are afraid of something. Kneale is great at that sort of thing, the sense of foreboding, the sense that whatever it is that is happening right now, and that helps. I think the sense of tenseness, the sense of creeping foreboding. There's a lovely speech that she has here about scientists not being absent-minded, but Charlie being meticulous. But it's largely there to give them a chance, to give Reginald Tate and John Glenn and Duncan Lamont a chance to get from the set that they were on to the set that they are at, because this is live television, and frequently you could not start a scene with the people who'd left the previous scene, because they had to get from one end of the studio to the other, or at least get set up for the next set, and also because you would only have at the beginning of the scene probably one camera and another getting ready, because you probably have 3 cameras. Now this caused me so many problems. This was probably filmed in the grounds of Alexandra Palace on I think the 3rd, maybe the 2nd or 3rd, I think the 3rd of July. And I was convinced these 2 men here were stock footage, but I wasn't sure. And 2 extras are listed for the filming at this time. So it could have been, did they? But I was like, no, because they're in banks of instrument. And the whole reason you would use stock footage is to give yourself banks of instruments that we do not have available to us. And anyway, eventually I did track down the stock footage, and those men are on it. And it's from some of the V2 testing that was going on in the late 40s, I think, early 50s. So anyway, it's listed in the book. I'll tell you exactly what the stock footage is from. But so we have this footage from these 3 men, and the actors, Christopher Rhodes, Peter Bathurst, and Duncan Lamont are listed in the filming, but Enid Lindsay isn't, and yet she's there. So I'd got these 2 extras, Peter McCart and Paddy Ward, and I wasn't sure what they were. And I think I've narrowed it down to probably what they were doing, which is something in episode 4. But they're on the paperwork there resolutely, and you go, well, I've got to go with the paperwork. But Enid Lindsay is not. It took me ages to work out what he was saying there, Reichenheim. He says, I hope it's on an island with lots of pretty girls. I think it's very key that Reichenheim, the German character, is good fun now, because we have German spoken later, and that's important. That bit where he speaks in German is very important. But Kneale's girlfriend, Judith Kerr, was German and had escaped from Germany, had escaped the Holocaust. So, but of course, a lot of German scientists were there helping us with our rockets. That was some of the sort of penance that they paid in the post-war situation. But he makes sure to paint Reichenheim as a really likeable character. We really do sort of miss not getting to know him, because he seems a lot of fun. And also because we're going to hear German shortly, and it is a sign that something is wrong. But that's playing so cleverly with all sorts of expectations, because German voices generally in entertainment of this time are the voices of the enemy. When you hear German spoken in movies taken around this time, they're largely war movies, and they're largely people threatening or up to no good, especially if they're speaking in their own language, where they're issuing threats or it's the sounds of battle or whatever. Tate does this very well. He's I feel so helplessly ignorant, and he doesn't know if what's going on with his friend, but he doesn't know if he's racked with guilt. He's just seen his friends who are missing alive again, and that film makes him remember, and the memory is really painful to him. But this is my favourite bit of the whole episode, where we've established, he has a line earlier, Reichenheimer speaking in German just to tease Victor because he knows he doesn't understand, and then minutes later we hear Victor speaking in German. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, we've already had the hints about Charles Green, but now we have him speaking in the German of Reichenheim, and of course German is a language that unsettles us at this time, because it, as I say, the voice of the enemy in the war, which only ended 8 years earlier. Everyone watching pretty much will have fought in that war, certainly have memories of it. All these actors will have been involved in it. They all served, extraordinary. So Germany is still the voice of the enemy. Now that's not what Kneale is about, because Kneale's about to marry a German. So he's not engaging in sort of cheap shots or invoking them glibly. But what he's doing is he's playing with that idea of that accent. So he subverted it by saying, no, the German guy is on our side and we really like him and he's really friendly. But then when we hear the German voice coming out, that's already dissonant, because the guy who can't speak German speaks German, but it's playing with the fact that we've just got used to this language of the baddie being used for a goodie, and the fact that we're going, no, we're a bit more sophisticated. We're not as ambivalent towards the German language as we might be in this situation, because we know that we're coming from a much more sympathetic place, and then he uses it to unsettle. So he's playing upon those inbuilt things. He knows what lurks in the dark recesses of the mind, and in fact that becomes key to the plot of Quatermass in the Pit. So it's deeply, deeply sophisticated stuff. It's a shame that scene has to be interrupted by, I think, a slightly late Murray Watson, and everyone has to sort of stand slightly awkwardly. But that's the last we see of Murray Watson as well, who goes on to become a fantastic actor, incapable of a bad performance. But he's not the best thing about the Quatermass Experiment. But he was a lovely, lovely man. I had the pleasure of exchanging letters with him on several occasions, and I spoke to him on the phone a few times. He was so kind and so helpful. And I eventually went and visited him at his home. And what a pleasure that was. Why didn't I take a photograph of myself with Murray Watson? I don't know why I didn't do that at that time, but I didn't. Maybe I was going to come across as a professional. Bugger that now. And I love this scene. And look, we start on the scene of Patterson and Briscoe, because Quatermass and Lomax are making their way across the studio to be in place for now when the camera cuts to them, but they weren't there when the scene began. I love the way this scene is shot, but look at the way the focusing is. Patterson is not that far behind Briscoe, and yet he's completely out of focus, because that's the trouble with these cameras. But actually, him being out of focus really helps the shot. I think it's gorgeous. And it really focuses on Briscoe, who's looking at the jelly-like substance. And I think this could be really awful, a sort of histrionic outburst as the last thing that we've seen. But actually, Hugh Kelly is absolutely bang on, and the look that Tate gives him in the face of his panic, I think, is absolutely fabulous. And in comes Inhumanity, pouring into our ears as the last noise that we hear from Quatermass Experiment. That's it. That's part 2 of the Quatermass Experiment. That's the end. Oh dear. Well, thanks to the Quatermass Experiment. And yes, and now we have, and I think it's Sylvia Peters. There were two, weren't there? Mary Malcolm and Sylvia Peters. I'm pretty sure this is, or am I sure it's Mary Malcolm? I can't remember. Whichever one it is, I'm absolutely sure of it, and have now forgotten which one I decided I was absolutely sure it was. But you can see the next episode of the Quatermass Experiment next Saturday evening at 8:45. And Mary Malcolm, who the Wire is based on Doctor Who's The Idiot's Lantern, does appear as herself. Well, her voice appears in episode 5 and episode 6. So there's a bit of verisimilitude where the BBC Ali Pali announcer plays herself in the Quatermass Experiment itself. So anyway, I've got to choose my 5 favourite things. Well, my first one is easy, and I've got a feeling John knows that this is my favourite scene because we've done talks and we've presented the episodes a couple of times. The scene where Karun starts speaking in German. I think it absolutely sums up the sort of sense of menace. I think it's a brilliantly Nigel Kneale idea. I went into detail during the episode of how I think it does clever things with our perception and sort of the innate prejudices is the wrong word, but instincts that the audience might have when hearing that language. But what Kneale has already done to turn that on its head by creating a benign and even very, very likeable and funny figure out of the German character, whose presence also, points us to the time we are in, and it's a happy coincidence that he can use that real life in those real life situation, that real life situation, and those incidents to play to his strengths, because he can get the proper German from his wife, who can say exactly how it should be phrased and all of that. But to create an absolutely creepy, and Kneale's brilliant melding of the familiar with the unfamiliar, the straight, and that's it in its essence. Victor Karun is familiar to everybody there, and in fact Ludwig Reichenheim is familiar to everybody there, and we've met and established these characters, but then to have one of them speaking the words of the other, that's the best Doctor Who menaces are kids in a gas mask, crack in the wall, murderous telephone flex, taking things, for giant maggots, taking things from real life, putting them in situations that we're not used to seeing them in, which has the familiar, therefore, in the unfamiliar, and then making it creepy. That's so much more effective than almost anything else in terms of scares and spooks and menace that aren't about shocks and jolts or viscera. And I just think it's beautiful, and it's really well done. Duncan Lamont does it well. I think all 3 actors that carry that scene off really well, and the timing of the music as well when it comes in, when he starts speaking in German. It's just brilliant. I think it's the best scene of them all in the whole of what exists of the Quatermass Experiment. So definitely that is number 1. Number 2 has got a bit. I love Full of Love's speech about what's space being pitch dark both day and night. I know I've already chosen, I think, Full of Love, haven't I? But I really like the character, and so if I choose his speech, although then again I do also like the bit where he tells Quatermass, "I'm just here to watch the aeroplanes." So hold that thought, because that's 2 Full of Love things, and we're gonna have both of them. So what else can I choose? Let's see if there are other things I can choose to see if I get 1 or 2 Full of Loves in my selection. Would 2 be too many? Would that seem like I've got a bit of a man crush on a character that I played? That is a bit of a worry, isn't it? No, because the reason I wanted to play him was because I loved him, and he's not in the film. He's such a good character, so he gets. So let's choose some of the other bits. I love the cliffhanger, and I think it's particularly strong that Hugh Kelly doesn't make Patterson histrionic, and because the actor actually never does a telly after this. I'd worried before I saw it. Oh, he's not an actor we know, so he might be very bad, and it could be a weakness because it's that sort of role, and actually he's great, and it's a wonderful cliffhanger, and because it's the last that we have of the Quatermass Experiment as well. I think those final flickering images with the panic face of one character and the stoical but foreboding for the face of Quatermass, our hero, full of foreboding, I think is a wonderful contrast, and it's just a great bit of sci-fi. What went on in here, what did it do to them? Whoa! Cracking, and the feeling of loss that we have as those images fade into nothing. So the cliffhanger, I'm trying to think, because Jon's very good on sort of what lines mean things and what references there are to other things. So, the Comet Jet is important because the Comet Jet was emblematic of new frontiers that were being crossed. You could fly to the other side of the world. So the fact it's in Australia has historical precedent. I think I discussed that in episode 1. And apologies for anything I've repeated from episode 1, but I did it a week or so ago, and sadly my brain is atrophying. And I've been a busy man. A lot's happened. But yes, so Australian testing of V2 rockets was what was going on. So it's a plausible setting, but also it means that we can invoke the comet, which is part of this brave new world of technology that Quatermass is exploiting in order to, do his experiment. And the comet actually was short-lived and a false dawn too. But it's that is a very sort of interesting reflection of the times and deliberate invocation of something that was emblematic of frontier breaking and technology improving. I love Inspector Lomax and the fingerprint scene. I love that. Is that going to be one of them? I think the line about perhaps it's murder, that would be like pushing somebody off Mount Everest again. That shows us it's another indication of the timeless quality of this series. This serial is in fact rooted in a lot of specifics to not only the year in which it was written, but the week in which it's being broadcast, pretty much. All of this it's almost like Have I Got News for You? It's Drop the Dead Donkey. You've got this science fiction plot, and they're throwing in references to stuff that happened this week. And there's me invoking Drop the Dead Donkey as if it's a modern reference. For those of you that are young, Drop the Dead Donkey was a sitcom set in a newsroom, and you'd have the episode of the week, and what they very cleverly did was, they'd rehearse the sort of comedy story of the week or whatever, and then but then just before it went to camera, the night before broadcast, they'd throw in lines sort of on the floor referring to a news story of the day. So it seemed like everything that was happening at GlobeLink News was happening, as we were watching. So there, yeah, I've made a reference to something and then had to explain what it is, because even my modern references are very old. And God, I was videoing Drop the Dead Donkey when it was going out, as I was in between watching the Quatermass serials as the exciting teenager that I was. So I do like the fingerprint scene, and I like the fact that it's Sergeant Best, the sort of doughty sidekick sergeant character that gets to do a bit of the specialist investigating himself. It's always worth being a character in Kneale's shows, because you always get something to do. The outside filming is very nice, and it's very economical, isn't it? They're just filmed against the sky. You don't actually see what they're standing on or what they're near or anything, because they aren't. They've made use of the fact that they're at the top of the hill at Alexandra Palace to show that you don't need to see anything in the background, and just bung in a bit of stock footage. But yeah, there's the scene with the inspector, isn't there, in the spaceship? There's the end of the scene at the celebration site. There's the scene in the hospital. No, so I think I've got my 5. So number 1 I gave you was the scene where he speaks in German. Number 2 is the cliffhanger. Number 3 I think is the is the discovery of the fingerprints, because that is the start, I think, isn't it, of the idea that this isn't, and I think this benefits us more as a modern audience, actually. You would think you're going for, yeah, he's been infected by an alien and he's turning into a blob, but Kneale's already undermined that before it's become the cliche by going, he is not he is possibly they, and what's happened to the astronauts is something that we can't even quite conceive, but that later ends up making a strange sort of sense. What he's done is he's the plankton of the ether, the creature that just sort of seeps into them in outer space. It's like they go through a sort of oil slick, and he disassembles them. The creature disassembles them and then reassembles them all as one in order to create a host to acclimatize itself to life on Earth. That is so much more interesting than he's been infected and he's turning into an alien. There's a biological process there that has a purpose. But also the fact that it's not a creature that speaks or you can really converse with, I think is very Kneale. Most of the aliens in Quatermass are really abstract, and we are nothing to them. And I think that's really compelling. That's more interesting than the Doctor Who thing of what I think Gareth Roberts' father described, was it Gary Gillett's father described as squabbling rubber, which I think it's Gary Gillett, isn't it? And that can sometimes be a painful problem with science fiction, where people have to have conversations with aliens, because if you make their dialogue too colloquial, it's just like, well, they just seem like a man off the street. But if you make them all Shakespearean, it can be a bit pompous. I fucking hate gold aliens in cloaks who speak boringly, and Kneale generally tries to avoid that and goes, no, we can't converse with them. But they have different biology from us, and they have to either overcome or take over or alter that, or to do whatever it is they need to do. To the extent that in the very final Quatermass, it's just for a brief moment of, in the same way that we'd dab a bit of sherbet or whatever. And I think that is much more unsettling than something with a blue head that you have a conversation with, and it's very clever. It's very clever in that regard. And so part of what has happened is that the three bodies have been melded together, which gives us this new fingerprint. So I love that start of that particular aspect of the mystery, which comes key to the resolution of the whole story, because what remains of the three astronauts within that avatar becomes key to our salvation. In the end, humanity versus technology and the unknown. Our soul, if you like, you can go as far as that. But I love that it's Best, who we don't really know, but he's been introduced as, you think he's clearly just going to be the one that the inspector gets to talk to in order to tell their side of the story and go, yeah, I've interviewed him, Chief, or whatever. But actually, he gets his moment where he gets to do the bit of reasoning that leads us to that first conclusion. So I've chosen that just above. Oh, but I love the bit where Quatermass discovers that the outfits are still linked inside, and the look on Reginald Tate's face, and the fact that he slightly, as Best says, that shook him, and the fact that Lomax is so reasonable in light of that. Yeah, I'm going to choose that instead of the fingerprint. I love the fingerprint, but I'm going to choose that because we have various hints that it's all three men, but that's the start of what the hell has happened to these bodies. They didn't get out of these, and it's a great moment for Quatermass. It's a great moment to show that Lomax is not actually intransigent and unsympathetic. But these men are slightly working at cross purposes, and that's partially due to Quatermass putting his defences up, and it turns out he's wrong. Lomax is on his side, and so that's really good characterisation, because everybody's got a decent reason for being how they're being, but they're still at loggerheads, but without either of them being an arsehole, and I think that's really effective. I love the character of Lomax. So yes, no, I'm going to go for the scene where, and the look on Tate's face is brilliant when he puts his hand in and sees that and it's a great use of that thing that we've established about the suits being linked inside, and it suddenly becomes this thing of great terror. So yeah, sorry fingerprints, I'm going for the linked suit, the links inside the suit in that moment. Then I'm going to go for I'm just here to watch the aeroplanes, because I think it's a great line at the beginning to show Full of Love just being light and cheerful to Quatermass, but then it comes back later as something that shows that he's actually deep and decent and kind, and it's a brilliant moment, and I love it. It's a bit of sort of unspoken camaraderie, the sort that's the sort of thing I go for. I'm not good at things where people cry or say they love each other, and I'm not really bothered about that, but a kind of unspoken sort of slightly male bond thing where you sort of say a thing without actually saying it, and you have a moment of understanding. That's what gets me the collywobbles, because it's unspoken. Because saying things is hard. So yes, I love that moment. It's just a really nice, deft piece of writing as well, that where the same line serves two different purposes, really, at the beginning and at the end of the scene, and it helps to establish that Full of Love is different from his sort of gossipy colleagues, and that he and Quatermass have a potential bond. So I could now throw in the fingerprints, but I'm gonna dare to repeat myself and choose a Full of Love moment again, because I do love the character, and I do think he's really important to making this successful in serial form, because you need sort of extra characters who really bring something to proceedings and aren't just padding, and I think this would be poorer without the texture. Full of Love brings to it, and I love that speech he has about space being pitch dark both day and night, empty and cold, and that's that whole scene that he has with the editor where he's cottoned on to the fact that Quatermass is lying, but he's sympathetic, but it means that the journalist has the scent, and I think it again, that works on a number of levels, in terms of the commentary, in terms of the texture of the piece, in terms of the role that Full of Love plays, and in terms of Kneale's approach, his kindness towards his characters, and the kindness exhibited by his characters when they, and their intuition, which makes us warm to them. So yes, those are the 5 things: the German scene, the cliffhanger, the linked suit, Full of Love's I'm just here to watch the aeroplanes, and then the Full of Love scene between him and the news editor where they discuss Quatermass stalling desperately. It's got the word fibs, and the line is, granted he's been through days of frightful strain, finds he's made history and lost 2 valued friends in the process, but that doesn't make him tell fibs. You couldn't have that line today because it's got a couple of real 50s, is frightful and fibs, and yet it kind of works and is kind of glorious and is in no way naff. I love it. So those are my 5 things. What has Jon Dear, producer of the Quatermass Experiment Live, writer on Nigel Kneale, co-host and founder of the BERGCast podcast. If you've enjoyed this, there is plenty of Quatermass goodness in podcast form over at BERGCast, where John and various cohorts, his latest co-host is Andy Murray, but there's loads of people on, including me, in an early edition, go all through the Quatermass oeuvre and into other Nigel Kneale stuff. And in fact, the latest episode, as I record this, is an interview with none other than Brian Cox. Brian Cox's son, Alan Cox, was in our live version of the Quatermass Experiment, but the mighty Brian Cox from Succession and everything else talks about appearing in the year of the Sex Olympics, and his memories are absolutely fantastic, and his enthusiasm for the subject is infectious, and the fact that they've got him on that podcast is a testament to them, and he enters in it very, very gamely, and it's a brilliant listen. So head over to BERGCast, but not before you've heard Jon Dear's 5 things about the Quatermass Experiment. Let's see if we tally. They're peculiar to this episode.
The cruel fate of having the in-vision continuity announcer tell us when we can watch the next episode of the Quatermass Experiment, but we can't. That always gets me. That always annoys me. It always fills me with hope, even though beyond time travel, I know I can't ever see that episode. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that, and here are my 5 favourite things about persons reported missing. First is Full of Love scene with Jacko. This is a great illustrative way that Kneale does of moving the story on in an emotional sense rather than just plot development. Where Full of Love's talking about he can see that Quatermass is lying, and he can see Quatermass doesn't want to lie, and he can see that Quatermass is covering something that's too terrible for him to contemplate. Full of Love is the heart of the Quatermass Experiment. And in many ways, we don't really have a conventional hero as we understood them in terms of an action hero, of the leading man. Quatermass is quite a taciturn, emotionally distant character. So Full of Love takes a lot of the emotional journey that people want to go on as to why they should care, and both with the scene, mainly with the scene with Jacko, but it also continues later on to scene with Quatermass at the airport. And it's a great example, both of Kneale having the nous to have a different character, and in many ways, a different strand of the plot to make the viewer understand why they should care emotionally, at the same time that the meat is being served by the predominant plot of Quatermass and what's happening to Karun, and the very subtle, almost underplayed nature of Paul Whitson-Jones, which, given if you know Paul Whitson-Jones's at least Doctor Who career, isn't something necessarily you think of when you think of him as well. But I think that's both delightfully done, an important hook in the story, and a good example of what Kneale brings as a dramatist. That's my first favourite thing.
And I think Jon very cleverly got two of my favourite things in his one favourite thing, and I think it's partially because I chose Full of Love in episode 1 as well, didn't I? So I think I wanted to nail down specifics, and as a result, I nailed down 2 specifics, which used up 2 of my choices. So that was bad gameplay from me, but it doesn't matter. I don't mind saying I love James Full of Love twice in one episode, because I do love both of those scenes, and for slightly different reasons, although Jon did it was very clever in the way that he sort of rolled them into one having the same sort of purpose. But and I'm glad he chose he specified the bit about Full of Love knowing that Quatermass was lying and being sympathetic about it, because I do think that is a really nice and deft character touch, because he could have just been the journalist on a mission who goes, I wasn't born yesterday, I know he was lying, god damn it, Jacko, I'm on the case, slug of whiskey, I don't play by no rules. But instead he's a much more interesting character than that. But that's put me at a disadvantage, because although I get 1 point, I've essentially got 1 point out of 2 choices, which doesn't help me in the game. But the game is not the thing really in this. It's more the approach to the game, the final result. Well, it's the taking part. It's not the winning. Let's see what Jon's second choice is.
My second favourite thing is Quatermass saying, only 30 years ago I nearly decided to give it all up and do land surveying in the tropics. That at least would have harmed only myself. That's a killingly funny line from the most morose character that's supposed to be the main character. Cheer up, mate. The idea that he sees anything through this absolute hangdog lens of negativity, and he's like, obviously he's been stressed for the reasons we know. Both the rocket's late, now a disaster has happened, but from the moment we've seen him, he's just been depressed. And then to think I should have given this up, and in 1923, when I had the chance to, instead of what I am now, which is presumably the most eminent rocket scientist in the UK, if not even the world, could have just been land surveying the tropics, but also the feeling that it would have ended in disaster. But because it's just him, only he would have been affected by it. I find that really funny. The idea of I wish I'd done this. I wish my part of life had taken a different path. Mind you, that would have been a disaster as well. It's just a wonderfully British way of dealing with it. That the worst thing now is I've involved other people. I'm not sure in a way that was the plot, but it's a beautiful piece. I think of characterization. Again, going back to my first point, a very different type, of very British type of hero for this for this thriller. And when you either as you know it as a science fiction serial or a thriller for television in 6 parts, it's interesting to have this deeply flawed character as your lead, as your hope, and as we know later, he will come through. But I think that's a lovely little piece of Monroe's characterization, and it makes me laugh.
It's funny. It doesn't make me laugh, although I do like it. Does now that Jon has put it like that. I've always liked it as I think in my head I was going to choose that, and then I forgot about it, even though I did talk about it during the episode. I should have chosen that instead of one of the Full of Love things, because I do think it's a key moment, especially as it's absent, as I say, from the script book. But it's a key moment. I've used it in clips. I used it in something I did for Radio 4 Extra, and in fact I've used it in the video that heralds the book launch to show that Quatermass is not the Quatermass of Brian Donlevy in the films, but that Kneale's character is a troubled, a tortured soul. He embodies the big issue with scientific breakthroughs, and that they come with a cost, and that big difficulty that a moral character must wrestle with, in that when you take a risk, you don't just risk yourself, and that progress is bought on. Progress instigates change, but change is not always all the changes our bodies go through are not painless. They are painful processes. More metamorphose, as we see with Victor Carroon, comes at a cost. But so scientific progress, you break barriers, don't you? But break means you break things. And Quatermass is always painfully aware of this, and I like the fact that he's a slightly melancholy hero. That appeals to me, and but he is, the way that Jon characterizes it, he is a bit like Eeyore, isn't he? Yeah, he sort of go, oh well, I could have. See, well, if I hadn't done the rocket group in 1950, no one would have died. In 1951, no one died. 1952, no one died. 1953, there was the bit with the rocket. In 1955, there was that bit with the moon project. In 1958, 59, there was that bit with the hole in Knightsbridge. But yeah, he's sort of. If I had done land surveying in the tropics, I'd have probably burnt down the rainforest myself. He does seem resigned to the fact that wherever he goes, he's going to leave dust and despair in his wake. But Tate does it very well, and as I say, it's an important window into the soul of the character, which shows that all the science fiction shenanigans aren't just about being earth-shattering, because sometimes we can get, we are then distanced from that. If the world being destroyed, it's spectacular and it's exciting. But if we see something weighing heavy on an individual, that kind of involves us more. It engages us on an emotional level. So it's important that this breakthrough in science fiction had that important human content, which, remember, a lot of even really good sci-fi B movies at the time that we love and that endure to this day don't actually have the sort of humanity to them. If you look at something as brilliant as the Thing from Another World, which is full of characters, it's got so many speaking parts in it, but we don't ever feel sort of emotionally invested in them particularly, because stuff didn't really do that at that time. But this does. The Quatermass Experiment does, and Kneale does. So it's a great scene. I love that bit, but probably for different. I'm not as amused by it as Jon is, but I do like his take on it. And if I thought about it, I should have taken that. So I should now be 2 points ahead, but it's 1-1 going into thing number 3.
My third favourite thing in Persons Reported Missing is Carroon speaking German. Now, I know that viewed through modern eyes, the fact it's foreshadowed almost immediately beforehand by Briscoe saying Carroon can't speak German could look a bit naive, but we have we have to try and transport ourselves back to the naivety of what a television audience would have been like in 1953, and that doesn't really matter. So the revelation that he can't speak German, and then he can answer technical questions on the gimbal system in German. I noticed there isn't a German term for gimbal system, which is handy when doing the translation as to give you a hook. But it's genuinely chilling. And then we have a bit of one with Best and the fingerprints. But it's a chilling piece of foreshadowing when you go, what is that? You know the German guy is missing. You know he can speak German. You've had the scene where he recognised Green's wife, and you're just starting to piece together that something incredible has just happened, and really not in a good way, and that is quite chilling.
Yay, he chose the German scene. Yes. It's interesting. He didn't allude then to the fact that I think I've made it known that that's my favourite scene. So I don't know if he knew that he was choosing something that I was going to choose, but did so anyway, or whether he'd forgotten. But anyway, it is a brilliant scene. I think it's quite artfully dropped into the film, with Briscoe saying, Reichenheim is teasing Victor. I think that kind of works. It doesn't seem to me like Chekhov's German sentence. But maybe I'm just you look at the things you love with you don't notice their love handles, or I don't know what a love handle is, but I think it's a love handle. Isn't that a fold of skin? Is that a love? Let's not get into, but you know what I'm saying. You Quatermass and the love handles. You know what I'm saying. You tend to the things that you don't see the faults in the things that you love, unless you're a Doctor Who fan, when you see all the faults in the thing that you're supposed to love. But you know what I mean. But I know. I'm gonna now. John's very good at. He's very good at business and stuff. And if you say something that he disagrees with, he's very good, because he's got the art of negotiation about him. And he'll say, "Yeah, I just want to push back on you with that." And it's lovely when somebody says, because you go, "Oh, okay, you're disagreeing with me, but you're doing it very politely, which has made me stop getting defensive, and it means you have an interesting conversation." It's very clever. But I'm going to push back on John with that and say that I think that it's quite artfully rendered, the setup of the German and the fact that Victor doesn't understand, because he doesn't say Victor doesn't speak German. He says he's teasing Victor because he knew he wouldn't understand. I think that seems characterful to me, and it's happening when loads of other stuff's going on. When we're seeing one of the rare filmed sequences, when we're seeing the missing characters as themselves, so we're getting to know them, not just in reported speech. I think no, I'm pushing back, John. I'm pushing back, but nonetheless, we are in accord. So it's 2-1 to me. Let's see what John chooses for number 4.
Fourth favourite thing, which again is connected to the previous one only in the sense of it, we have to take into account how the audience would have perceived things at the time, is the fact that, as in many ways we're watching a, as we understand it, a science fiction series. At the time, it's a thriller. It's mass audience event television, but nevertheless, it involves people at the forefront of an alien invasion, and yet it's done like a police procedural, because that's something the audience would be familiar with. If it was NASA, and the audience comes back, if it's something like the film Life, and it ends with an infected crew returning to Earth, you wouldn't get the local constabulary to investigate. The stakes would be seen as higher. But here and now, we have a situation where we're surreptitiously taking fingerprints from the astronauts. I'm not entirely sure why. I know dramatically we then get Best being able to see that they have amalgamated different fingerprints. But the idea of the sort of charming naivety that you would have an investigation from an inspector from Scotland Yard, rather than this being dealt with by the upper echelons of the British government. But this is something that potentially either the audience isn't ready for, or wouldn't make as much sense in connection with what's going on, that they wouldn't potentially understand. Now we, looking back now, see this perfectly, that we have that advantage of over 70 years of history. But it seems so off kilter now to assume that this could ever be a police procedural until you put yourself into the position of a viewer in 1953, which looks like a really, really different way of doing it, and while giving Quatermass somebody else to talk to, Lomax and Best can have their scenes, which expands the dialogue, which expands the world in which we're operating, which gives more material for the writing, etc. It just seems as a very different way of doing it, and I find that quite interesting, and would be interested now that if you put back something into if it arrived in Penzance, would Devon and Cornwall police be on, or would the Met still be seen as the primary go-to? In many ways, it sometimes reminds me of where you'll get a sort of 50s B movie set in America, and something will land in Hicksville, and the local sheriff will have to investigate, and that will be seen almost as a comedy thing. But here, it's deadly serious. They're doing what they think they would do, and I find that very interesting.
Yes, it is. It's the big barrier, actually, in terms of if you were to remake it in the modern day, the idea that Scotland Yard would get co-opted into what would be a specialist investigation by specialist government people. I mean, I don't know what the setup would have been in the 1950s if there would have been a department for space investigations, especially as, I mean, Quatermass has at least got government sanction to do what he's doing. It's not like it's not like he's done a sort of clandestine rocket launch, but how many departments were there in government that would have investigating science under their purview? But nonetheless, yes, it does seem very odd that you get, and I think the Quatermass rocket has crash landed in Birmingham. No, in Wolverhampton. Yes. Oh, I'll get the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad on the case. Oops. But yes, but it does, as I say, yes. So now, if you were to remake it, because you need those scenes with Quatermass and Lomax, you need that relationship. And as I say, I'm really happy. It's a much kinder and more sympathetic relationship than it was in most stages of its development. And because I like the rapport that they have, and it's sometimes a bit boring if you've just got obstinate heads of different departments shouting at each other. I much prefer the fact that they're all trying to do the same thing, but from their own different approaches and perspectives and points of view. And as John says, it's very useful in having the different sets of characters. But it also, if it had been a big government department of suited and booted people and people in hazmat suits and people that knew what they were doing kind of thing, it wouldn't help tell the story in the way that it needs to, because the fact that, I think he even says, doesn't he, I'm playing catch up here, the fact that the guys in charge of finding out what went on wrong in terms of their expertise, that they're investigators, they still need filling in on all the stuff that we as lay people would need. And also it gives us that contrast between the otherworldly and the people. Otherwise it's conversations between everybody who knows what's going on, and we feel slightly excluded. So the policemen are our kind of way in, and they are. And Kneale thrives on juxtaposing the ordinary with the extraordinary, and so having two policemen who are our sort of staple of thriller drama, as John puts it, and it is called a thriller in 6 parts by Nigel Kneale. It's it has the thriller template as its storytelling. So of course the thriller is going to be investigated by people who usually investigate thrillers, the police. It's just that this one is from somewhat outside of their jurisdiction. But that means that then we as the audience need to get filled in, perhaps slightly more artfully than we are in episode 1 when Blaker is told rather on the nose how the rocket works. But even though, as Andy alluded to in part 1, that is still done rather well and with a nod to character. So yeah, good. I mean, I love the characters of Best and Lomax. They get some great business and interactions later on, but I didn't really choose that. So it's 2-2 going into the final thing. So if John chooses the same as something I've chosen, the odds are slightly unlikely now, I think. It means I win an unusual situation for Happy Times and Places. Or, as they were assured halfway through episode 6 of the Quatermass Experiment, after a technical failure, normal service will be resumed when I lose Happy Times and Places. Let's see what John's final thing is.
And my final favourite thing is the cliffhanger. Not least of which because when I first saw it, I had to look up the word colloidal. And now I use it in such a way that suggests everyone should know what it means, but that's me. In many ways, this builds on the first cliffhanger, which is going into the rocket and seeing that there's no one there other than Karun. Now we have Patterson investigating, as he has been all episode, the control room, and then finding whatever it is all over the walls, as in centrifugal force has burst it out. And his passion scream, which again foreshadows the journey Patterson will go on over the course of the next 4 episodes, screaming, what went on here? What did it do to them? We've pieced together something that's suggesting Karun has aspects of both Green and Reichenheim. So something incredible, as I said before, must have happened. And now this substance is all over the control room. But we have no hook, we have no understanding, we have no, smoking gun. It's just a substance we don't understand, and a passion cry, what went on here? What did it do to them? That's chilling, and we never get that resolution. That's the last we see of this. We can read, we can reinterpret, but we'll never see as it was originally done. But it's a brilliant place to go out. I just wish we could have had more.
Oh, I agree, John. I mean, my joy at victory, sweet victory. I won. I chose 3 of the same things, 3 out of 5. That is a victory for me. But victory is bittersweet. Oh, if only I'd done Happy Times and Places whilst land surveying in the tropics. At least then I could have enjoyed my victory. Because yes, the rest is silence. I mean, until very recently, we didn't even have many pictures of the later episodes, but I like to think I've helped with that one a little bit. But buy my book, by the way, if you don't know to what I allude. But nonetheless, those performances, some of those amazing scenes coming up, particularly, I think the stuff in Westminster Abbey and the showdowns in the final episode. There's some absolutely extraordinary stuff there. And the various bits of, that we keep coming back to Karun as he sort of atrophies and as his humanity is eventually succumbs to the onslaught of the bodily invasion to which he, ultimately, that ultimately consumes him. Oh, so much stuff there, and some brilliant scenes of dialogue and some brilliant scenes of character. Oh, the return of Miss Wilde, the old lady. Oh, gosh. All gone. There's a funny film. There's a bad cinema film, which is hilarious. So ahead of its time. So much to come in the Quatermass Experiment that we cannot see. But the meta thing of having the monster revealed on television, and then Quatermass getting a brilliant 2 speeches. One, he apologises to the nation. He said, I'm really sorry, I've probably killed you all. And then he appeals to the humanity within the creature, and it is that humanity that wins in the end. Amazing stuff, whilst a massive vegetation gets into the very fabric of Westminster Abbey and threatens to destroy the world. And panic is caused. It creates, to quote the title of episode 6, a state of emergency. Oh, all that, and you've got Wilfrid Bramble as a drunk. You've got You've got Karun escaping after being kidnapped by gangsters. You've got all sorts of. You've got the desiccation and destruction of a load of birds out on St James's Park. Oh, sorry, that was me getting a text message from Katie Manning. I was going to say nothing. I thought, damn it, I'm going to say that. Sorry. So, yes, how sad, but he's right. The cliffhanger is brilliant, and I think Hugh Kelly does it well. And colloidal that's a liquid in which other bits of particles are in, isn't it? It's a sort of little particles suspended in a liquid or in a substance, something like that. And it's the fact, and I didn't allude to this, and it comes, they sort of dwell on it a bit more in the next episode, when one of the reasons Patterson is so stressed out is he goes, I've been in here all night, basically surrounded by this ick, whatever it is, that has spread into the sort of clogging up the workings and the sort of internal skeleton of the rocket itself, and is basically surrounding them as they're standing in it, which is a pretty grim concept. So again, he's very good at making this stuff feel sort of visceral and menacing and unsettling. It's glorious stuff. I so wish we could see the rest of it, but we never will. They flickered once, those images. I mean, 21 years before I was born, those images flickered for the last time, those words were spoken for the last time, those actors congregated together for the last time, for the one and only occasion they were going to perform each episode of that serial that is now flying out into space somewhere, but never to return. We can't pick up those pictures. So thank you for joining me for the Quatermass Experiment. There is a bit more left on Jon's audio file, so let's see what else he has to say about. Maybe he's plugging his podcast, I do hope so, because it's marvellous, but he will put it in better words than I. So one more word from Jon Dear, and then I'll be back to say cheerio.
So those are my 5 favourite things. I'm interested to hear what yours are, and if indeed you won. I think that would be quite appropriate for something that's celebrating your book. I won't plug anything because I think that's particularly appropriate on something that's about essentially a big plug for your book, and as it should be. Oh, safe to say that we'll both be on the Blu-ray of Hammer's The Quatermass Experiment, which comes out in June, doesn't it? So I'm sure we'll look forward to seeing that when it does. Thank you very much for having me on, Toby. It's always a pleasure. Thank you once again for being always so supportive on anything I've worked on with you. It's always been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday week, which will be the 19th of May, which I'm sure will be a very happy time and place. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jon. I'm very fond of Jon, and he's been very, very helpful. And yes, I mean, as I say, I probably speak to and or text Jon every day because we like the same things and we get on and we have fun. So, of course, he was going to be on this, and he's written a lovely afterword for my book, The Quatermass Experiment, which is published now by 10 Acre Films. So I hope this has whetted your appetite for that, or accompanies it, or gives you the last push if you were wondering whether to buy it or not. Jon and I are on the Hammer release of The Quatermass Experiment, and on the very morning that I am recording this, it has been announced, we knew this, but we couldn't tell anybody, that we are also on the Hammer release of Quatermass 2, the film. I've done the second part of a documentary about Nigel Kneale. I'm also on a documentary talking about Quatermass itself, and looks like they've done a little extra feature about Brian Donlevy's interpretation of the role, and I think I'm on something else as well. I've done something else on it too. Yeah, I've done so. I'm all over it like a rash. It's like I've infected it and have now spread my tendrils throughout, changing it's very whatever. I'm on Quatermass too, and it's a great movie, and it'll be another brilliant package from Hammer, and it's limited edition. So, but it's got the TV serial on as well. So, yeah. Get yourselves the Hammer box set of Quatermass 2, which has been announced hot on the heels of the imminent release of the Quatermass Experiment, or with a big X, the film. But we've been talking today about episode 2, the last existing episode of the Quatermass Experiment. I hope you've enjoyed hearing all about it, and whatever went on, those final episodes, whatever went on in them, and what it did to, well, we know what it did to them. It shocked the nation and changed the shape of television. But exactly what went on, we'll never know. And we can't see the next episode of the Quatermass Experiment next Saturday evening, or indeed ever again. But maybe that's part of their magic. But anyway, they always take me to a very happy time and place, and I hope you've enjoyed your sabbatical away from Doctor Who, the Whoniverse, into the Quaterverse. And until next time, goodbye. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Jon Dear, who presents the BERGCast podcast, which is about Quatermass and all things Nigel Kneale. Check that out. I'm grateful to Jon and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, James Crowley-Smith, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, Christopher Meredith, Gavin McLean, Richard Straw, Neil Tate, Nick Tedston, Tim Arding, Nigel Bromley, Paul Cook, Richard Chalk, Peter Chamberlain, Grant Davidson, Jon Dear, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Paul Dunn, El Pandras, Susie Ferguson, Jason Gorman, Siobhan Galichon, Paul Harris, Chris Hyam, Ian Key, Ashley Knight, and Joe Llewellyn. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. I'm grateful to those mentioned and everyone else who congregates on my Patreon. A number of them turned up, a number of you turned up on Sunday last to support the book launch, and it was really nice to meet everybody, and it was lovely that we managed to get that photograph. As you can, I guess, imagine from the way that I'm talking, if you don't hang around there, my Patreon is a nice place. There's nobody dicking about and being unpleasant. It's just nice, and there's a lot of enthusiasm there, and it's just about liking our stuff and connecting. And I hadn't anticipated the community side of it, but it's been an unexpected and very pleasurable bonus. And that's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 per month you get access to bonus materials, you get early access to all the podcasts, you get behind the scenes stuff, you get all sorts of little bits and bobs, and a little bit of indefinable magic too. That's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. You can also support these by going to kofi.com/Toby Haydock and occasionally throwing a few quid my way if that's the way that you like to subsidise. What are we? Self-employed creatives? Is that what we call ourselves these days? But you don't have to do anything financial if you can't or don't want to. That's absolutely fine. Just listening to these is support enough. However, if you want to do something that costs you nothing but a little bit of your time, you could go to anywhere online that you get your podcasts, wherever you consume this content, that you can give these 5 stars and a couple of lines of review and like and subscribe and do all that sort of stuff that just helps to make other people aware of these broadcasts. That is really helpful, because one doesn't ever like to think one is shouting into the void. I'm on all the social media, on X, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Starburst, Snickers, I'm not calling anything Snickers, at Toby Haydock and at Haydock Podcasts, specifically for these podcasts. I've also got onto Blue Sky, just basically whoring myself around in every single corner of cyberspace, including Instagram at toby.haydock. I've got a YouTube channel. If you like and subscribe there, that really, really does help. And I have my own website, and I also have a Facebook page as well. So just come and find me. So there we are. Yes, Quatermass 2 is on DVD and Blu-ray. Quatermass Experiment has already been announced. Quatermass 2 has just been announced. The book, The Quatermass Experiment, is available now. It's available now. The hardback is sold out. The paperbacks are still available from 10 Acre Films. Thanks for listening, and I do hope you buy the book. And if you do buy it and you enjoy it, please write and tell me, because that will make an old man very happy.